And thanks, Brad and SEC team for this linkage to Bowel Cancer West. We're very pleased to work with you. We're a charity in the West Country who have been around for 10 years, raising money for training, research and awareness projects for bowel cancer. And I'd like to bring in my team, our Chief Executive Officer, John Gripton, who's in on this teleconference. Our fundraiser is not with us today, Vicky Jinks, and our administrator, Janine Cayley. I'm not here primarily to ask for your donations, but they would be very welcome in this difficult time, and we will share through WhatsApp the text to donate link with you if you're minded to do that. We've been working over the last 10 years, and we've spent more than several hundreds of thousands of pounds in the West Country. We are the only charity in the West Country focused on bowel cancer. And the reason for our presence really is that we feel there is a place for us to support improving outcomes for patients with bowel cancer, which is one of the commonest cancers, unfortunately, in this country. Now, my message really is to you individuals is firstly that bowel cancer is a curable disease. It is a curable disease. We don't talk about surviving with bowel cancer or living with bowel cancer. We talk in many cases about curing bowel cancer, which may sound strange, but technology has moved on so much in the past few decades that with the combination of things like surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, people get back to their normal lives. And the other myth I'd like to dispel is that most of those don't end up with ghastly bags on their tummy either. The other thing I'd like to say is awareness of symptoms. You and your family, if you get any symptoms, it's vitally important that you visit your GP early on and get investigated because it is a curable disease. We're all touched by it in some way. We all know of somebody who's suffered from this, but we want to improve outcomes in the West Country. Very fortunate in working with Brad and team. We've got lots of fantastic ideas for events coming up as soon as this awful pandemic starts to melt away and the lockdown goes away. So watch this space. Lots of good things coming up. And as I say, we'll share the text to donate sometime after this meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to, with thanks, hand back to Brad and team. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, for us, I've lost someone I know quite close to me recently to bowel cancer as well. So this is, equally touching for me, and more shame again we couldn't get out on our cars. And obviously, really, honoured to support an incredible cause. Let's introduce our next two guests. We have Paul Woodman from Lovecars. Some of you have seen him from his YouTube channel and ITV's Lovecars on the Roads. And also we have the former CEO of Aston Martin, Dr. Andy Palmer. Welcome, guys, to the chat. Andy, you're on mute. Just to let you know.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. Andy, I've met, my time working for Aston Martin, Mayfair, and Paul, I've met once or twice, I think, mate. So it's really great to have you both on board. Paul's going to have a chat with Andy, find out more about him, what he's up to now, what he used to do, and some very important things that Andy's put on the road for all of us that maybe we might not be aware of. So, Paul, can I leave it to you to take over?
Yeah, it'd be my absolute pleasure. Thanks, and it was great to hear about the Bowel Cancer West as well, Mark. So I look forward to supporting that in any way that we can. And Andy, Dr. Andy Palmer, crikey, automotive leader, visionary, and a all-round nice guy. It's a pleasure to talk to you, but it's been a funny old year. So I'd like to know, and hopefully the others would like to know what you've been up to. What have you been up to over the last 12 months? It's been quite an interesting one.
It's been 2020 was a funny old year. That's probably an English understatement, isn't it? My life changed quite a lot, obviously. In the first 6 months was all about getting Aston Martin through the COVID crisis. But obviously during all of that COVID crisis, the ownership of Aston changed. And in May, we parted company. Since then, I've gone back to trying to do something that I was really, really passionate about in my days at Nissan. I don't know whether you know, but I conceived the idea of the Nissan Leaf. And it kind of grew into this thing of around zero emissions, and sort of fast track
So tired.
15 years forward. And
It's on. They got Andy Palmer on that on Brad's stream. Yeah.
oh, what happened?
Fucking sounds like those to men.
I'll sort this one, guys. I'll sort this one. Hang on, I know it is.
15 years forward, it's sort of moved on from tailpipe emissions to net zero carbon, and
Brad's got
sort of been trying to.
Which I was meant to be helping out in, but obviously that's been cancelled now.
Guys, can you mute your can you mute yourself if you're not on the chat, please? And then Bradley will introduce the members shortly. So I think it's Luke. If you could mute yourself, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sorry.
All right, Luke, you can take over if you like. And so, in consequence, I've been working in this net zero space, and consequently taken on the chairmanship of Optare, which is a bus company, creating something from that, which will be further announcements shortly. Vice chairman of a startup battery company called Innobat, and a few other things around that zero emission, zero carbon space.
Fantastic. I think we had the Nissan Leaf, the old one, the original one, and the new one in our TV show. And we described it as the most pioneering car since the Ford Model T, because it was the first ever mass-produced EV. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. But in terms of emissions, are we going to get, and we've got a lot to get through, so we'll be quite quick, but are we going to get anywhere near the zero emissions of 2030? Because it just seems we're a long way away from that.
Well, remember, that's the UK. So, frankly, UK could go zero. The rest of the world needs to come with us, and that's the key point. And I think there is a moment in time around COP26 later this year, which is really important to see whether the UK is moving alone or whether it can take a leadership role and bring the rest of the world with us. Number one. Number two, of course, there was a big compromise in that 2030, which was the use of hybrids, which actually pushes it out to 2035. So in reality, the deadline is 2035 because most cars will be hybridized by 2030. And then there's a debate around the technology you use. And I guess one of the things that I get quite cross about, even though I would call myself an evangelist for EVs, one of the things I get really cross about is when governments mandate EV, because EV is not the only solution. And I actually think it's the wrong solution for supercars and Formula One and things like that. I'd much rather see us increasing the speed of development around synthetic fuels, which can equally get you to net zero carbon, but would allow you to use the current internal combustion engine technology. Likewise, fuel cells, and likewise, a whole bunch of stuff that just hasn't been invented yet. It's really important that we don't allow our governments to push us down one particular technology path, because let's face it, they don't have a very good track record of picking winners, do they? I give you diesels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we could discuss for some time, and indeed we'll come on to Formula One in a minute. But your time at Aston, what a time! You had a massive impact for me personally. I think it was a time where so much change and the design just became beautiful again, and the quality became beautiful again. But from you, what do you think you'll be remembered for most at Aston?
I hope. I mean, look. Obviously, what I inherited was essentially a bankrupt company with a 13-year-old product, and it was tough because there was never enough money in the company. And the first thing I did, and what I'd perhaps like to be remembered for, was the specials. Those limited run, very exclusive cars like the Vulcan, like the Zagatos, like the GT12s. I bought a GT8, by the way, so in love with it. Those seem like great collectibles, but actually they financed DB11. That's the truth of the matter. And obviously, I'm very proud of DB11, Vantage, and DBS, but perhaps most proud from a legacy point of view of the DBX. And the Valkyrie. Those are the two crowning moments. I hope that history remembers me for those two products.
So your most special single memory, what were your most special single car out of your tenure at Aston Martin?
It's probably going to have to be the Valkyrie, actually, and you haven't seen it yet, but the Valkyrie is so radical, so far away from anything that any car company is. I mean, the closest you get is the McLaren F1, but it's something way beyond that. It's maniac, but it's the pinnacle of internal combustion engines. And if you will, the other car that I'm really, really proud of is the Leaf, for very different reasons, but kind of the pinnacle of mass transportation.
Yeah, you couldn't get a bigger split, really, could you? But I've heard the Valkyrie at Silverstone. I've seen it in your lobby, and I concur with that. And that naturally aspirated V12, what a masterpiece! Absolutely, music to your ears.
Well, yes. Wait till you hear it revved up to 11,000 revs. It's amazing.
So nice, tenuous link, 11,000 revs to go on to Formula One, because you're a bit of a fan, and it's kind of down to you that this whole Red Bull tie-up. I've got all the merch ready here. Red Bull, Aston Martin, Red Bull.
Hold on. Yeah, I look. Do I love Formula One? I guess I have to confess and say yes, I do. My dad used to take me as a kid to Silverstone. We lived in Stratford-on-Avon. And we'd go across to Silverstone to watch various races since I was a little boy. So I've always had an affinity with racing, but in particular with Formula One. That's true. But obviously, I mean, the reason for making the relationship with Red Bull, which was a straightforward business one, it was to raise the awareness of Aston. Well, in the first instance, actually raise the awareness of Infinity, because my first relationship with Red Bull was with Infinity, but at Aston, everybody in the UK knows Aston. I mean, it's sort of part of the furniture. But the further afield you go, the less is known about Aston. And in some places when you do the surveys, people actually thought that Aston was a movie car, but only produced for the James Bond movies. And what we needed to do was we needed to reach those people to improve their awareness of what the brand was about, and that it was very real and you could go and buy one. Places like China, for example. And that was what Formula One was all about. It was basically about spreading the message, getting in front of 650 million people every year, and basically telling them that, the cool car you see James driving around in, you could drive one of those cars as well.
That's got to be the best ever link up ever, Aston Martin and James Bond, by the way. I'd like you to say a bit about that, but just quickly want to show Brad's viewers that we've got a pair of, I was kindly sent these by Puma actually, and I wanted to keep them, but it seems crazy not to donate them to BCW and allow Bradley's guys to bid on those. So a signed pair of Alex Albon's shoes from last season. So unused. He hasn't done a shoey like Ricciardo. Sadly, he didn't get on the podium, did he? But there you go. But James Bond as well. James Bond, massive. That's huge for the brand. That must have been a great fun tie to do.
It was. There was a moment actually through the Bond 25, which, as you know, seems to be constantly delayed. But there was a moment when I even wasn't sure whether there would be any cars at all in that movie. The first director, who was thankfully sacked, but basically didn't want any cars in the movie, and that would have been a disaster for us. But finally, of course, with the director that was chosen, it went from the sublime to the ridiculous. We got 4 cars in the movie. I'm really, really pleased. Whilst it plays a cameo role, I'm really, really pleased that Valhalla is in there, which basically means not only looking at the DB5 and the past, but also looking at the future.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. In fact, our old mate Ben Collins, who'll support this. He's a local boy as well, Mark, Southwest. So we're going to be driving this in a couple of weeks, the Goldfinger car, up with another mutual friend of ours from RML. So I'm looking forward to that. So but the whole James Bond tie-in, the old and the new, is brilliant. And some of those stunts that these guys do, Ben and the guys, are absolutely crazy. Bradley,
those DB5s that we used in the movie, essentially they're not DB5s, as you know, but if you look at them, they're first of all, they're probably better built than the original DB5s, but they're amazingly realistic, and of course they allow those stunts to be made.
Yeah, brilliant. It's amazing what goes on behind the scenes, really, with with these stunt cars. Like you said, it looks like a classic DB5, but underneath is a brand new car, and you can do all your skids and whatever you need to do.
A BMW, if I remember correctly, but probably shouldn't say that.
Well, it's kind of a bit, that's another tenuous link, because BMW, Brexit, the impact on the market, and I don't want to get too boring with this, but there's lots going on, and I'm interested to get your opinion on the impact of Brexit on the market. And we haven't got a trade deal with the USA. So BMW, you just mentioned the X5, the X7, they get built in the USA. There's going to be 10% duty on those, but the whole impact on Brexit, and everyone's maybe going to nod off now, but maybe we'll keep this one quick, but I'd love to get your opinion on that, being an expert.
Well, the principal issue with Brexit was the unknowing. I mean, 4.5 years of just not knowing what the deal was going to be, and that's done some amount of damage to the auto industry. Couple that with the free trade agreement with Japan, and you whilst they won't say so, you probably come to the core of the reason that Honda have decided to leave the UK. However, I don't get into whether Brexit is good or bad, but the final deal, I think if the car industry had been offered the deal that we got 4.5 years ago, we'd have signed up for it, because essentially there's no tariff. We've got a 1-year grace period on the rules of origin. The local content is not too onerous, and there's a bit more paperwork. So I guess in all, the auto industry has not been so badly affected by it, and it allows us to maintain our relationship with Europe in terms of manufacturing for Europe. As I say, the bad news is more to do with the trade agreements with Japan, which means there's also no tariff on cars coming from Japan, and therefore the UK Japanese plants will have to be even more efficient to justify their continued existence, particularly in a time when all car companies are retooling their platforms towards electric.
Yeah, it's a challenging time for manufacturers, that's for sure, with so many unknowns and so many variables. But Bradley, very conscious of your time, but I'm going to like to just ask Andy a couple of quick questions and then hand over to you. But what do you like to do when you're not doing car things?
At the moment I'm... well, first of all, by telling you this, I'll predict the end of the end of the coronavirus, because for the last 12 months I've been building a garage, workshop, and office in my front garden, and it finishes in March. So I guarantee by the time my office opens, then basically coronavirus will be done with. So there's a prediction for you. I've essentially recreated the tool room that I grew up in as a 16-year-old, and specifically because as you may know, somewhere way back in my career, my engineering expertise was in gearboxes, and as a consequence, I love clocks and watches. So basically, as I head into the twilight of my career, I've got this image that I'll toddle off to my workshop and make clocks. So. That's one of the big things for present and future. When I can, I race. I race GT3s and GT4s, and I have a small collection of cars which I enjoy. And when I can, my son and I go out on a motorbike, and we go and tour bits of the country. So that's pretty much any time that I have is usually consumed by one of those 3 or 4 things.
Doesn't sound bad, and I hope your prediction of COVID ending soon is a good one as well. So finally from me, your dream car, you've mentioned the Valkyrie, which I got to say is right up there with me as well. But your dream car, what would it be? And it's a horrible one when someone asks you that, because what do you mean? Do you mean a daily driver? Do you mean classic? Do you mean modern? But have you got something that stands out that you just would love to own that you've never owned, or that indeed maybe you do own now?
Yeah, well, I have... I have a 1980 Aston Martin Vantage, which was my dream car in the year that I was taking my test. So I fulfilled that fantasy, and I've got a Valkyrie on the way, so I fulfilled that fantasy. So I'm a very very lucky man. But what I've been looking for, and I haven't been able to find yet, is one of the milestones in my career was given the honour of saving the Isigonis Mini. If you remember, around about 1989, 1990, when Euro 1 was introduced, the company, the official parts of the company couldn't fit a catalyst into the Mini, and in consequence, it was slated to end. And I had a young, naive team that basically said, bollocks to that, let's find a way of fitting it in. And that's exactly what we did, and we were able to give the Mini a new lease of life. So I'm you know, one of spots in my garage is reserved for a Euro 1 Mini.
Fantastic. Bradley, bang on cue with your timing. How's that?
Perfect. Thanks.
That was more Andy than me, but thanks, Andy.
Well, a question for you quickly. Hopefully everybody here has watched you on ITV recently over the past sort of last couple of months. A quick one for you then. What has been your highlight of getting yourself on TV, working with Tiff, and you know, your favourite moment from the show? And I know someone from Ocean BMW's listening who loaned you a Z4. So if you want to mention that, I'd be very, very pleased.
Yeah, that was the Z4 was the highlight of the whole show from Ocean BMW. I grew up watching Tiff on TV, as I think a lot of us did. And you know, I worked in technology and had no desire or inclination to ever be in front of camera. In fact, I don't enjoy it, and we only did it because we couldn't afford proper presenters. But as it turned out, it was an incredible journey, and one that has opened a lot of doors. And we're talking about a series 2 now, which would be a lot bigger and with a budget, because we did that on shoestring budget. And my team get really annoyed when I say about the budget, because the quality is, if anyone has seen it, I think you'll agree that the quality, take the presenters, take the personalities out of it, but the quality is you know, right up there. And there's too many highlights to mention, but for me, the driving one of my dream cars, the Pagani Zonda Cinque Roadster, was right up there. But the best times, I think, was when Tiff and I was just going out in a pair of cars, DBS and an 812, for example. That's in episode number 1. Pair of V12 pair of V12 cars, and just having a laugh. You know, just a couple of mates going out and having a laugh, and that's really the ethos of the whole show and what we did. So, which hopefully came across.
No, definitely. Yeah, I thought it was brilliant, and I'm sure everyone else here, you know, watching, thought it was equally good. While you've been chatting, I dropped a message out to all the members to ask some questions. So we actually have a very, very friendly another YouTuber. That was the fastest finger first. Hopefully he's going to come on and turn his camera off now. Can I introduce you Peter Greaves to ask a question? Mr. Petrol Ped.
Good afternoon. Well, no, good morning, everybody. Paul, hi, how are you, mate? Good to see you.
Very good. Another TV star. Well, not that I'm a star. Ped's a star. I'm not a star.
We're back on. Quest, 9 o'clock Thursday.
There we go. There's his drop.
But obviously, Paul, you and I did that Nissan Leaf EV video for your channel. So there's a link to Nissan. But Dr. Andy, I wanted to ask you a question. We have met a couple of times. You probably don't remember. We met at a driver's ball for members meeting at Goodwood once, and at DBS launch as well. And it's always a pleasure to meet you. I always loved the way you interacted with your followers on Twitter as well. I thought that was very accessible. I have a cheeky question to start everybody off with. I want to know what you really said to Chris Hoy when he parked your car in the hay bales at Moulcombe Corner during Festival of Speed.
It was something along the lines of he was really upset about it. So I felt bad for him, but it was something along the lines of, Chris, don't worry about it. It's just a car. You.
I had a feeling it might be something like that. I know he got a lot of support from the drivers when he went back into the drivers' club, but I always wondered what you thought really when he dusted your car up.
The story of that car, that was really the first time in my life I could afford to buy a supercar. And I always like to buy cars that somewhere are a key part of my career. And GTR, and in particular GTR Nismo, the Nismo aspect of it was my idea. And so basically I'd agreed with Nissan that I would buy the very first Nismo that was coming into the country. Which I did, and I thought it was a really, really good idea to give it some history and have it raced up the hill by Chris Hoy, and that was a really shit decision. completely wrote the car off, and I don't have a GTR Nismo in my collection because I left Nissan.
But he carried that off so well. He got out of the car and he did a bow to the audience and waved, and that was brilliant because my head would have been in my hand. So he carried it off like a boss.
The only legacy I must add, having now driven up the hill quite a few times at Goodwood, is I think fewer people will crash at Morecambe because of that crash. Because as you come into Morecambe, you just think, Chris Hoy, don't do a Chris Hoy, and you put your brakes on earlier than you would do normally.
As you know, when you're lining up, most people go down the line and say, nobody remembers someone that makes it to the end. Everybody remembers the guys that crash. So I've always gone around that course very, very carefully.
Indeed. But thank you for answering the question, and thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Cool. One of the team actually has been pretty fast. So, Rachel, would you like to ask your question to Andy? And Andy may recognise you from Aston Martin Cheltenham. You never know.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Hi, Rachel. I'm very well, thank you.
So I sold Astons for about 14 years, and I'm going to unashamedly ask you a really girly question. So I think one of the things that sets any car apart is the colour. And I'd like to know, what is your favourite Aston Martin colour and why?
I've always preferred really simple colours, particularly on an Aston, because the proportions carried off so well. So both my GT8 and my Valkyrie are white and black, and in different ways. Though the GT8 is sort of white car, black roof, and black skirts, whereas the Valkyrie is rather unusual insofar as it fades front to back, black to white. But I've always found that combination of white and black seems to me to suit the Aston design. And everybody else has silver, right? So I always wanted mine to be different. The only exception I made to that was my current Vantage, which is a beautiful cherry red and with a black roof. And the point about Aston, I guess, is you can have whatever your fancy takes you. You know, you've got a palette that, you know, as far as your dreams will go if you want, and Aston does paint beautifully. Takes something like 75 hours to paint even a standard Aston. So it is one of the highlights of the car, and I think it's something that you should is really about being personal. But black and white sounds a bit boring, doesn't it? But I do think they look great in black and white.
Cool, thanks, Rachel. Stefan Oatway has a question about the Mercedes tie with Aston at one point. So Stefan, if you want to unmute yourself and over to you, that'd be great.
Morning, Andy.
Morning.
It was just a quick one, really, of what did you think about the collaboration between Mercedes and Aston Martin, and how do you feel it's going to develop into the future?
I thought it was conceptually a great idea. To be honest, it was one of the reasons that I joined Aston. The fact that link existed. It wasn't always a smooth relationship for sure, and Aston didn't always have access to the very, very latest technology. But I do, you know, whilst the real reason I joined Aston was it was the last remaining British car company, and I passionately wanted it to be like that. So I always viewed the relationship with Mercedes or anybody else as something that you needed to have for access to the technology. On the other hand, me personally, I would hate to see the company being absorbed by Mercedes, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily the way that it goes, but I certainly hope Aston will be allowed to preserve its independence.
I think we all do. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, thank you.
We have a question from Robin Sharp. He is a DBS Superleggera 59 owner, and you're going to talk about your new car, Robin, which is very similar to what Andy currently owns. So over to you, Robin.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Andy. I was actually quite intrigued when you said you'd bought a GT8. I've just swapped out of a Vantage 59 back to a Halo GT8, and I must admit, for me, the absolute right move. So I was very interested to hear when you said you're loving your GTI. I was very interested to hear why that is.
I simple stuff, isn't it? I think it's the sound. I don't think there is a better sounding Aston in frankly the history of the company. It just howls at you, and it's just wonderful. And it's a no nonsense, very straightforward racing machine that you take on the road. I mean, I had the honour of driving in quite a number of 24-hour races with Aston, and the GT8 is the closest that I've ever got to taking that race car on the road. I just love it. I mean, it's not for everybody, right? It's an extremely hard ride. You have to work at it. It makes you sweat. It makes your ears ring. But what a wonderful way to spend a day.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Probably got time for maybe 2 more questions. So we'll go to James Stewart with your question. Okay, over to Will Morris with your question, Will, to Paul Woodman, actually. So we'll come back to James in a second.
Morning, everybody. Paul, I've got a question for. I'm going to give you 150 to 250k in budget. You've driven some cracking cars over the last however many years. What are you going to go for?
I think, you know what? I'll go for 2 cars. I'll go for. I'll be greedy. I'll go for. There's a.
Grand, one of the earlier ones, which is just, how can you possibly get a V12 manual
noise? And then with the other money, I'll probably get myself an RS6 because I don't think there's a better daily than that. I actually like SUVs, but I think the RS6 is just one of the most crazy cars ever. So maybe I'm a little bit over or a bit under, whichever way you look at it. But 2 very special usable cars. You got the manual and your auto for every day.
That does cause a problem though, Paul, because it's not actually on our qualifying car list, mate. So that's unlucky. Right, James Stewart now is back online. So James, over to you, please.
This one's for Andy. It's just regards to sound, really. So how do you see brands like Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, brands like that who have always been about the noise and the theatre of their cars, how are they going to differentiate themselves, do you think, in the next 10 years?
That is the $24 million question. It really, really is, particularly as you evolve towards electric. I mean, that was the reason that I believe that Lagonda needed to go fully electric, because there you're looking for silence. You're looking for a masterclass in silence, and that somehow or other you needed to find a way of preserving the sound in an Aston. I don't know whether this is true, and I go back to my earlier remarks of that we shouldn't allow governments to interfere in solutions, only in problems. But my hope is that sports cars will be allowed to use synthetic fuel, which would allow the sound of engines to continue. Might be a bit more expensive to fuel, but I think enthusiasts of supercars will be prepared to pay for that. So I do know that Porsche is working quite hard on synthetic fuels, and if that was a solution, that would be great, because we could go directly to net zero carbon, but maintain the fundamentals of the internal combustion engine, and therefore the sound. And wouldn't life be poorer if we didn't have the sounds of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, or indeed an Aston Martin?
Speakers is the way forward on the outside of the car. Simon Parsons, probably the last question we've got time for. So we'll finish with you, Simon.
Hi, Andy. Nice to meet you. Quick question for you regarding hydrogen fuel cells. With your expertise in EVs, and obviously the information you've just given us regarding synthetic fuels, where do you see hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in either supercars or mass production daily cars?
I don't see them in mass production daily cars, if I'm being quite honest. The efficiency of the thermal efficiency of fuel cell is much worse than batteries. The issue with batteries is range, and with the fast development of batteries, I see that being overcome relatively quickly. I do see fuel cells being used in heavy goods vehicles, and probably in intercity buses, intercity coaches, where you do have a demand for a longer range, and where perhaps you can stand that little bit less of efficiency. But it's expensive at the moment to get a fuel cell to the level of something acceptable. The price of hydrogen needs to come down by basically to a third of where it currently is. It's about £6. It needs to come down to about £3. And of course, there's no point in taking hydrogen if you're not taking clean hydrogen. At the moment, almost 99% of hydrogen produced in the world is basically grey or blue, and only 1% is green. So there's a long way, and probably fuel cells are 10 years in the future, and I think where they'll find themselves is basically in the heavier end of the market. But there is a space for them.
Great. That's it, guys. We've run out of time, but thank you ever so much, Andy. Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure.
Thank you everybody for asking their questions. It's been a brilliant morning. This is on record, so I will share this again to the group by link to the WhatsApp groups, and I will share ways to donate and to BCW and also win the Paul's trainers. So blind auction into the WhatsApp groups. It will kick us off any second, but a huge thank you to all of you. And I'll share this video with everyone at the end of it. So if everyone wants to give a virtual clap to Andy, that'd be brilliant. And Paul, thanks, guys.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll see the club at the Yorkshire Motorsports Festival in June next year. Oh, sorry, June this year now. So I'm on the organising committee. So hopefully we'll find a way that we can get you all up there for some way in some form.
I'll discuss that with you, Andy, as well, and I'll share that with the rest of the guys. Yeah. So yeah, we run out of time for that one, but no, thank you, and we'll get that link shared as well. We'll chat later.